Death, taxes, and Pokemon design discourse. These are the only things that are guaranteed in life. While it's true that every Pokemon is somebody's favorite, well, actually I don't know about Cascoon. In every generation, it always feels like there's some designs that get a disproportionate amount of hate. So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and today I'm gonna break down some of the most hated Pokemon designs and why they might be just a little bit deeper than you think they are. Generation 1 is certainly a mixed bag. I think we forget about that a lot because they kinda get a pass for being the original 151 Pokemon. But when Gen 1ers came out in full force against Gen 5 Pokemon back in 2011, many were quick to fire back that Gen 1 is also full of weird and controversial designs itself. Probably the most vehemently hated of all of these would be Jynx. A design so controversial it actually had to be redesigned with purple skin in Generation 3. Jynx was the reason behind many of Pokemon's early banned episodes in the anime. It's not particularly popular in game, despite it actually having amazing typing and stats for Kanto. And the reason is quite obvious. The design is just a little off-putting, especially for us Westerners who have often seen Jynx as a negative African American stereotype. But in truth, this is not what Jynx was intended to be. In the 90s, Game Freak's first studio used to be in close proximity to the Shibuya 109 building, a frequent gathering place for Japanese women taking place in the Gyaru fashion trend, which often involved bleaching their hair and tanning their skin. A fun fact, by the way, this is actually why dry skin is one of Jynx's abilities, which is kinda funny. Jynx was meant to be this bizarre fashion trend crossed with the Japanese legend of the Yuki Onna, a Japanese ice spirit. But unfortunately, instead of trying to reform Jynx's image over time, Game Freak and the Pokemon Company have instead opted to mostly sweep Jynx under the rug. It hasn't appeared in any anime episode since 2006, Game Freak introduced a much more marketable Yuki Onna-inspired Pokemon that same year with Frostlass, and Mega Jynx was apparently cut very late into Pokemon X and Y's development. It even had its own cry in Pokemon Home and leaked concept art. And I imagine the only reason they scrapped it was to avoid digging up any more controversies. Is it a coincidence that Mega Frostlass may have taken its place? In truth, Jynx was probably a design that wasn't meant to leave Japan in the first place. It's a relic from when Pokemon wasn't an international brand yet. Their expectation was that it would probably just be some niche Japanese RPG. But you know, there is another game out there that isn't so niche. A game so well revered that it's actually making waves right now thanks to a huge collaboration with Assassin's Creed. 5 iconic assassins from the Assassin's Creed franchise are all joining Raid Shadow Legends as legendary champions for a limited time. And man, I have to say, I am pretty floored about these guys. They have perfectly recreated their designs and animations from the original Assassin's Creed games, and they look amazing. And players can receive Ezio for free just by logging into the game for 7 days. What's the big deal about Ezio? Well, he's a master assassin for one with a ton of valuable debuffing attacks. And did I mention that he's free for a limited time only? There's a variety of ways to obtain the other assassins, including Cassandra, the first champion from Raid's newest faction, the Argonites. Be sure to team up with these powerful champions to take down the event dungeon's main villain, the sinister Pontiff Augustin. One of my favorite parts of Raid is that they're constantly adding new content all the time, and that you can play on any platform without losing any data, so I can play on my PC and take it on the go on my phone. If you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Click my link in the description or scan my QR code to get amazing bonuses using my link. Instantly unlock a huge starter pack with the legendary support champion Narma the Returned. Reach level 15 to get an amazing epic from the Undead Horde's Mausoleum Mage. Log in for 7 days to claim a free legendary Ezio from Assassin's Creed. And if you're a new player, you can pick one of the 6 promo codes for a free legendary champion of your choice. I like Sun Wukong the most because he reminds me of Infernape, so if you need a recommendation, there you go. Thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring, let's get back to the video. But hey, on that note, Mr. Mime is way less controversial, and probably equally as hated. Humanoid Pokemon already have a hard time gaining sympathy from the fanbase, probably because we like to think of Pokemon as a substitution for animals and not people. But when they resemble creepy clowns, yeah, good luck selling anybody on that. Its localized name literally containing Mr. also doesn't really do it any favors and kinda reinforces the idea that this guy is more human than Pokemon. It just kinda crosses the line where I don't think most people would be comfortable raising one. He looks like he should have a 9-to-5 job, not being trained for combat against wild animals. But Mr. Mime also has a surprisingly deep inspiration. as it is supposedly based on elves and gnomes more so than actual dudes who were mimes. This is mainly why it also became a fairy type in Gen 6. Its jerky animations in the early 3D Pokemon games like Stadium and Colosseum are meant to reinforce the idea that it's more like a puppet or a garden gnome that's being possessed, as the idea of spirits possessing inanimate objects and making them come to life is incredibly popular in Japan. This is also probably why inanimate object Pokemon in general are way more popular there than they are in the Western world. Unfortunately, I think revisions to Mr. Mime's design over time, as well as literally calling him Mr. Mime overseas, has tainted his image a bit in the eyes of the fandom. I mean, just look at his artwork from Red and Blue compared to his updated artwork from Fire Red and Leaf Green. Almost all of that cutesy charm has been replaced with something that looks oddly more human-like than a possessed doll. Part of that may just be the fact that he has 5 fingers now instead of 4, and oh boy, would you believe me if I told you this is because of another controversy. For the sake of simplicity, a lot of the original Generation 1 Pokemon had 4 fingers instead of 5. But apparently this drew a lot of criticism in Japan because this is often associated with Yakuza members who have cut off one of their fingers to atone for a mistake. And as such, by Gen 2, all of them had their designs updated to include 5 fingers. Except Poliwhirl, who just got big bubbly mittens to replace his fingers. A bit of a tangent, but I thought it was interesting. Now, Gen 5 definitely still to this day has some of the most controversial Pokemon designs, which is ironic because they were purposely made to look like modernized versions of Gen 1 Pokemon, with Unova being a soft reboot and all. The Clink family certainly comes to mind, which I totally get. They kinda feel like the Magnemite family, but with all the personality stripped out of them. The reason behind them existing is kinda cool though, as they were basically conceptualized around Gen 5's moving sprite art style. They wanted a Pokemon that was not only constantly in motion, but one that could also easily show off their new pixel layering techniques. And with each member of the family adding a gear, it was an easy way to show that off. And I have to admit, the sprite art is quite good, but it doesn't help that this aspect of its identity has sadly been stripped away in the 3D era. The Vanillite family is also here because ice cream cone bad. But honestly, Vanillix I kinda like because it has a ton of motifs baked together. Being from an American region, it was supposed to represent the oddly creepy yet happy looking fast food mascots, like Grimace. The straw coming from its head also makes it resemble a human heart, so it could be a pun on cold-hearted or bipolar since it's cold and there's 2 scoops. I don't love this Pokemon, but I certainly don't hate it like so many others do. I think a better shiny like Slurpuff has, or a Mega Evolution with all the extra sundae ingredients would have actually made this guy way more popular. Obviously, Trubbish and Garbodor have to go here as well. Now, to Pokemon's credit, they have tried to make Trubbish more cute and self-aware in recent media. Like, look how happy he gets when you try to catch him in ZA. He wants to be loved. Garbodor, yeah, he's just kinda ugly though, not gonna lie. They're just modernized Grimer and Muck. There's not much else to them, other than portraying how much waste and pollution there is in real-life New York City. What are they trying to say about us? And believe it or not, Chandelure also used to be in this group. People hated it back in the day. But unlike these other guys, the Pokemon Company didn't give up on Chandelure. They put it in Pokken to showcase more of its personality. They've given it a large presence across multiple games. It now has a Mega Evolution. And in 2020, it was actually voted the most popular Gen 5 Pokemon. If that's not proof that public sentiment can change fast, I don't know what is. This actually reminds me of the Galar fossil Pokemon, who a lot of people hated at first, but other media did a great job doubling down on the fact that they're supposed to be weird and goofy, and I think most people ended up coming around on them. But before we close out Gen 5, we can't forget the monkeys. I think part of the reason why they're so hated is just how in-your-face they are in the Gen 5 games. It sometimes feel like you encounter one trainer with a monkey in every area, and then you have to mentally prepare yourself to see the other two soon. It also doesn't help that their designs feel like they were all copy and pasted with a different typing applied. Simisear was literally the least popular Pokemon ever a few years ago, and who can blame them when Infernape is just better? According to a Game Freak interview though, these guys were specifically designed to be the companions of Silent, Chili, and Cress, Unova's first gym leaders. As apparently their designs and the idea of a gym that rotated types based on which starter you chose predated the monkeys themselves. This also goes back to my conspiracy theory that I mentioned in my filler Pokemon video, where I fully believe that Flamigo in Scarlet and Violet was intentionally made for Larry rather than the other way around. And you can definitely at least see this in the monkeys, with all of their hands resembling oven mitts to help with cooking. They also draw inspiration from the 3 wise monkeys in Japanese mythology, with Pansage constantly having its mouth open representing Speak No Evil, Panseer with its head next to its ear represents Hear No Evil, and Panpour with its eyes closed represents See No Evil. And when they all evolve, they become rebellious and drop this shtick while adopting 1950s American gang hairstyles. Just to once again reinforce that we're in America. These Pokemon are actually way more inspired than I think people give them credit for. The problem is they're still 90% the same, show up way too frequently in Unova, and some of their design motifs don't carry over outside of Japan, so I fully understand the disdain. Probably no group of Pokemon embodies this more than Sword and Shield's final starter evolutions. Now obviously, because they're starters, they all have a significant amount of fans. Even the most unpopular starters, yes, even Chikorita, are still more popular than most Pokemon are. But looking online, these are certainly the most hated across the board. They're the first starters to all be monotyped since Gen 2, which is not very exciting. There had been a growing resentment towards humanoid-based starter Pokemon since Gen 6, and this time, basically all of them become that. Cinderace looks more like a man than a rabbit. Inteleon has these really weird, lanky proportions. And Rillaboom has that awkward little drum that doesn't feel well integrated in its design at all. Why does it just magically get bigger when he sets it down? Now, of course, there was a reason behind all this, as Cinderace is obviously based on a soccer player, a highly popular UK sport. Inteleon is based on James Bond, a British spy. And Rillaboom is apparently based on an obscure British advertisement of a monkey playing the drums to advertise Cadbury chocolates. Don't ask me, I'm not British. But clearly all three of them are themed around British entertainment. And honestly, I feel like all of them have decent theming, but definitely could have used some revisions to where the human aspects didn't totally override their animal theming. I think that's where a bulk of the criticism comes from. While Gen 6's smaller Pokédex is widely considered to be one of the most solid across the board, it makes the couple of duds stand out all the more. I briefly mentioned Slurpuff earlier and how it's a surprisingly popular Pokemon now, but the same can't be said for its counterpart, Aromatisse. I think the Plague Doctor motif mixed with the perfume aspect was actually a pretty cool concept, but the cute little bird transforming into a woman-like flamenco dancer was definitely a stretch. As a pure fairy type, it also gets lost in the sauce of Gen 6's incredibly fairy-heavy roster. It's not as good as Slurpuff, it's not as accessible as Florges, so it just kind of brings up the rear of that category, sadly. And the Buttbow is not doing it any favors. Honestly, there's a good mix of design themes here that I can appreciate, probably my favorite being that it's partially based on birds using aromas from flowers to kill parasites that invade their nests. Honestly, if the design stuck more with the bird aspect that Spritzy had and was maybe fairy flying to help separate it from the onslaught of new fairies in Gen 6, it could have been decently popular. Also, Binacle and Barbaracle. I don't have a defense for them, they're just ugly so people hate them, but they're barnacles, so are they supposed to look good? Speaking of which, Bruxish is also hated mostly just for being straight up ugly. But hey, you know what? I may not like it, but I will be nice to Bruxish, as it is based on the Hawaii state fish, which I will not attempt to pronounce, which is, well, pretty ugly. It is a faithfully ugly design, kinda like Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I am now done being nice to Bruxish. It's basically this crossed with psychedelic artwork which is meant to daze and confuse people, tying into its ability and its typing. Of course, there are many reasons why fans hate Pokemon outside of just their designs. Take a look at Gen 2 for example, where you have a lot of Pokemon who are hated just for being bad or gimmicky. Delibird is probably the best example of this. Yes, Unknown exists, but it's at least sorta, kinda interesting from a lore perspective. But Delibird is just a Pokemon with god-awful stats built around an even more god-awful signature move in Present. They were so committed to the bit that for 20 years this Pokemon literally only learned Present by leveling up. And then they eventually relented and said, okay fine, you can have Drill Peck too. Not that it's really making a difference. But perhaps this too was intentional, as Delibird and its signature move Present by extension are possibly based on the idea of underwhelming gifts. Like when your aunts and uncles that haven't seen you in 5 years mail you socks and underwear for Christmas. Perhaps he should have been included in my These Pokemon Are Intentionally Bad video that I made a few months ago. But yeah, maybe another video in the future is warranted for Pokemon that are hated outside of their designs. So do you think that the criticism against these Pokemon is valid, or do you actually love all these Pokemon? Personally, I agree with some and disagree with others. I think inspiration saves a lot of them. But hey, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and check out Raid Shadow Legends using my link down below. I'll see you guys next time.